You might be surprised to learn that right now I'm walking on one of the possible remnants of Doggerland. And yet I'm in the middle of southern England in Hertfordshire. Let me explain. The year is 1913 and a man named Clement Reid would publish a book entitled Submerged Forests. It's a fascinating read and perhaps the first book dedicated to the existence of a long lost land joining Britain to mainland Europe. Clement was sure that land must have existed there, and he came to that conclusion based on plant and geological studies that he did. He longed for the day that something tangible would come to light, and perhaps one day we would find the stone circles of the antiquities now buried well below the North Sea. Had Clement Reid survived until 1931, his dream would have come true. 25 miles off the coast of Norfolk, a trawler boat brought up a lump of peat, and inside that a barbed spear made from antler was found. Sat there wedged in the peat and dated at 10,000 to 4,000 BC. And nearly 100 years on, we learnt so much more about what the land looks like under the North Sea, from the rivers, estuaries, marshland, to other events such as the tsunami in 6,200 BC, to the various sea level rises over time. But how does all of that relate to here in Hertfordshire? So this is the Ridgeway, and it stretches from way back in that direction to Overton Hill, the Sanctuary near Avebury in Wiltshire, all the way in the distance there to Beacon Hill in Hertfordshire. That's as it is in its current official form today. We know it probably stretched a lot further in either direction from that route, and we also know it to be over 5,000 years old. Some have said early Neolithic, maybe even late Mesolithic. So what was going on in the UK at that time? Now, I have a theory on this route, on this ancient trackway, which likely spanned from the east coast of England to Lyme Regis on the Dorset Jurassic coast. Now, I'm no academic in this field. I'm not an archaeologist and I'm not historically trained. So sometimes I'll give my own small theory on an idea or a subject, and that's okay, I've no reputation to lose. But this idea, this notion, this theory, well, it struck me as really obvious. Now, I'll come to that theory shortly, but first of all, something really important very much relates to this and is going to help us piece together this theory, a much more modern perspective on all of this. Just so turns out that today a new route that spans across the country is being launched, the Great Chalk Way, and that's going to help me explain my theory perfectly. So if we accept that the old Ridgeway was indeed a lot longer than the current form we see today and did indeed take that direction and route we implied earlier, well, this is great because... And now the Great Chalk Way is set to recreate England's oldest route, taking in 400 miles, 11 counties, picking up some established national trails and popular long distance pathways. We're now at Dunstable Downs. We're going to go and take a look, find out a bit more context, which will definitely help us with today's story.
Wow.
Hi Hadley.
Hello, how are you? You alright?
I'm good.
Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today. So the reason we're gathered here today is for the Great Chalk Way and the launch of the Great Chalk Way project and route. But the whole thing is about 400 miles long, re-establishing a prehistoric long-distance route that would have been used by our ancestors between the ice ages. West Stow has evidence of human activity 440,000 years ago. That's en route. So the history is deep, the scenery is wonderful, and I just want to invite you all to take a look at the information board, get acquainted with this, and spread the word.
So it's not often you explain the evidence before the theory itself. There's good reason for that, so bear with me. Let's go take a look at Barbary Castle up on the Ridgeway. So we're just south of Swindon over there, high up on the Ridgeway. It's a gorgeous day today, blue sky, no breeze, And I think the old Ridgeway is that way and the new Ridgeway goes down that way towards Ogbourne, St George. Either way, right ahead of me is a very beautiful Barbary Castle, Iron Age hill fort. Now up here we'd have a whole maze of ancient history through different eras. Importantly, we have Iron Age occupation here. At least 40 roundhouse imprints were found here. We have Iron Age pottery, and we even have an Iron Age blacksmith's hoard, including all kinds of equine stuff. So that's great with this Iron Age hill fort. We have 2,500-year-old construction. Really gorgeous construction. Beautiful views. Probably 30 or 40 miles on this really clear day, but it didn't end there in terms of the date of this site on the Ridgeway, because to the northwest we have a bowl barrow, probably of Bronze Age construction. And then there's more, because in 2013, well, I think just to the back on the east side over there, well, they found a flint knife, and they dated it to 5,000 to 7,000 BC. Now that's perfect. Let me explain why.
So why are we all here? Well, it's because paths really matter. They connect us. They connect us to where we're going, to where we've been. I always think that when I'm walking, it's like the spine of a story that you're telling as each step is taken. Because I have such a passion for archaeology and diversifying the people who feel welcome and included in the outdoors, I think that's a really fantastic way, not into nature connection, into heritage, but into connecting with communities that are alive and existing around us today, because paths don't exist in abstraction, they don't exist in a social vacuum. When you're walking any section of this route, the Pedder's Way, the Icknield Way, the Ridgeway or the Wessex Ridgeway, you're walking through living landscapes.
So back to Doggerland, back to the gradual climate change and the melting ice of Northern Europe. You can map the sea level changes over the last 20,000 years, place that into terrain models, and you can broadly give you the shape of northwestern Europe over that period, from the very early stages of this ice age, of this ice retreat, where you could hardly make out the shape of the UK and Ireland as we see it today. But it's at this point we start to see something significant. You see, the populations that we now know would have existed here, likely slowly moving south, the hunter-gatherers of the tundra being moved south by the ever-increasing sea levels. Well, around 6,200 BC, well, they'd have faced a very dramatic change, one that many would not survive.
This path really matters, this bringing together of the four to create something that's greater than the sum of its parts. I find that so incredibly exciting, because the actual linking up of the paths represents what we all are here to do, which is connect our organisations and our different interest groups into something that is greater than the sum of its parts. We have to work out ways to make this investable. We have to work out ways that this is a proposition to the people with pots of money to say, that is something I'm going to back. That is something I'm going to back because of nature, that is something I'm going to back because of climate resilience, biodiversity, tackling the biodiversity crisis, tackling our health and well-being challenges. Paths do it all.
Studies have suggested that off the northwest coast of Norway, this monumental tsunami would have started. Now, all along the east coast of Scotland, where we have deposits which are able to allow us to see dates of this event, 6,200 BC, give or take. Now, further studies have suggested that the Mesolithic population would have been wiped out to the tune of 25%. Now, that event itself wouldn't raise the sea level as a whole. Of course, the sea does retract after such an event, but perhaps not only did it change the face of the landscape, maybe new lakes were carved out, areas became much more marshy, perhaps it also changed the lives of the people that lived there. Not only the event itself, but perhaps as they moved forward, moved south in fear of such an event, well, perhaps their story passed on for generation to generation, the tales of that event.
Is this a route that would have meant people could trade from one coastline to another, meeting other communities en route, or were all roads leading to Avebury, for example? I don't know what the answer is. I don't know that there is one definitive answer, because as many people journey along a path have as many reasons to walk on that path themselves. There's no one fixed answer. And I think that's the same for people, travellers and pilgrims now as well. We walk for different reasons, but we all gain some of the shared benefit. Or maybe there's a bit that you will love and revisit again and again and again, or maybe it's the scale of that long pilgrimage that appeals to you. Whichever way it is, the Great Chalk Way is ours, and it's for the future as well. Thank you, everybody.
The Barbary Castle isn't the only place with Mesolithic finds along the Ridgeway. They're littered along here. It doesn't take much research. I think Uffington, Segsbury, Watlington, and even at the far end of the modern one, the Beacon Hill near Dunstable, well, that had them too. But just a few years back, Professor Vincent Gaffney led a team that took some core samples from various features within Doggerland, chucking huge crane-like cone sample equipment over the side of their boats deep into the North Sea. Now, the dates they gathered from these cores varied hugely, but one area produced something quite staggering. That date, 4,500 BC to 3,100 BC. Well, that's well into the Neolithic, a Neolithic landscape way off of the now coast. So let's move from there. Let's keep moving away from the melting ice and the increasing sea levels. Let's move away from the ever disappearing landscape our ancestors maybe talked of, waves and water and marshland, to the safety of high ground. Let's head to the Ridgeway. We now know that by at least 4000 BC this area had significance. It was more than just dwellings, and over the next 2 millennia we start to see significant change here. The Neolithic, people building monuments like their lives depended on it. I do wonder if the Stroger event and maybe others like it, combined with the shrinking ice and the ever rising sea levels, gave people this sort of inbuilt fear and stories that lasted through generation to generation as they slowly moved south-southeast and perhaps onto what we now know as mainland Britain, and perhaps from the Wash down the Ridgeway. The safe route is the Ridgeway, the high place, away from that primal fear, that primal instinct. And perhaps I'm romanticising that whole view and putting it all together in too much of a small box. Maybe it spans obviously eras more, but the fact there was a one-time incident, a tsunami, 6,200 BC, well, maybe that was the last straw, and that fear instinct, it was inbuilt and it never went away. And now we have a Ridgeway that had been used for thousands and thousands of years, a route to safety, maybe a route to the sanctuary. So I really enjoyed today's video. A big thanks to those at the Great Chalk Way. What a great event that was yesterday, the opening of that route. They're looking for volunteers, they're looking for promotion, they're looking for people to make it aware of a national thing. So I'll put a lot of good links in the description below. In the meantime, thanks for watching. We'll see you this time next week.